The wedding dress burned beautifully. Lena watched the white silk curl and blacken in the fireplace, flames licking at lace that had cost more than most people earned in a year. Her husband, 3 hours married, was in another woman's bed. The contract sat on the marble counter, her father's debts erased, her freedom sold. But here's what Adrian Kane didn't know yet. He hadn't bought a desperate girl. He'd purchased something far more dangerous. If you want to see how a pawn becomes a queen, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. The champagne had gone flat hours ago. Lena sat on the edge of the king-size bed in the penthouse suite, still wearing the wedding dress that had taken 3 assistants 40 minutes to lace her into. Her fingers traced the embroidered bodice, thousands of tiny pearls hand-sewn into patterns that were supposed to represent eternal love or some other bullshit the designer had explained while her mother cried in the corner. Her mother, who'd looked at her with those desperate, grateful eyes as Lena signed the papers that morning, as if Lena was a saint instead of a sacrifice. The suite was silent except for the distant hum of the city 20 floors below. Manhattan glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a carpet of lights that promised everything and delivered nothing. Lena had grown up in this city, in a brownstone in Brooklyn that her father had mortgaged, then double-mortgaged, then lost entirely to Adrian Kane's loan company. She checked her phone again. Nothing. Adrian had left the reception at midnight, hadn't even tried to hide it, just leaned close enough that she could smell his cologne, expensive and cold, and murmured, "I have business to attend to. Don't wait up." Business. Right. Lena had watched him cross the ballroom, watched Selene veer slip out 30 seconds later wearing a dress the color of fresh blood. Selene, who'd been introduced as Adrian's business associate, but who looked at him like she owned him, who probably did, in every way that mattered. The wedding had been a performance. 200 guests, an 8-tier cake, a string quartet that played while Lena's father shook Adrian's hand with tears in his eyes. David Voss, the brilliant architect who'd gambled away his firm, his house, his daughter's future on a development deal that had collapsed spectacularly. Adrian Kane had bought the debt, all of it. Then he'd made an offer. "Marry me," he'd said, sitting across from Lena in his office 3 weeks ago. "Play the role of my wife in public. In exchange, your father's debt disappears. He keeps the Brooklyn house. You get a monthly allowance and access to my world." "And what do you get?" Lena had asked. Adrian had smiled. It hadn't reached his eyes. "Respectability. My investors prefer their CEO to be settled, family-oriented. You're educated, well-mannered, and desperate enough not to cause problems." He wasn't wrong about the desperate part. Lena stood up now, the weight of the dress suddenly unbearable. She reached behind herself, fingers fumbling with the tiny pearl buttons that ran down her spine. 43 buttons. She'd counted while the seamstress fastened them that afternoon, while her mother fussed with her veil and talked about how lucky Lena was, how Adrian Kane was one of the most powerful men in the city, how this was a fairy tale come true. Fairy tales were for children who didn't know better. The buttons wouldn't give. Lena pulled harder, felt one pop off and skitter across the marble floor. Then another. She yanked at the fabric, breathing hard, the bodice constricting around her ribs like a cage. Fuck this. She found scissors in the suite's kitchen, sleek, expensive kitchen that would never be used for actual cooking, and cut herself out. The dress fell in pieces around her feet, thousands of dollars of silk and lace reduced to rags. It felt good. Lena kicked the fabric aside and stood there in the ridiculous lingerie the bridal boutique had insisted was essential. White lace and satin, meant for a wedding night that clearly wasn't happening. She caught her reflection in the darkened window. 23 years old, dark hair still pinned in elaborate curls, makeup perfect, body wrapped in costume pieces for a role she'd never auditioned for. The anger came then. Not hot and explosive, but cold, settling into her bones like ice water. She'd known what this was. Adrian had been clear, but some stupid, naive part of her had hoped, no. Hope was expensive. She couldn't afford it anymore. Lena walked to the fireplace, a massive marble affair that probably cost more than her college tuition. Someone had laid a fire earlier, romantic ambiance for the newlyweds. She grabbed the matches from the mantel and lit it. The flames caught slowly, then built. Lena picked up the pieces of her wedding dress and fed them into the fire. watching the silk curl and blacken. The pearls made small popping sounds as the thread burned away. The veil went up in a whoosh of flame and ash. Better. She found the hotel robe hanging in the bathroom, thick terry cloth that smelled like lavender and money. Wrapped it around herself and poured a glass of whiskey from the Sweets bar. Expensive whiskey, smooth enough that it didn't burn going down. The contract sat where Adrian had left it, weighted down by a pen that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Lena read it again, even though she'd memorized every clause. Marriage in name only. Public appearances as required. Mrs. Kane will maintain appropriate standards of dress and behavior. No disclosure of the terms of this agreement. Duration? Minimum 3 years, with option to extend or dissolve by mutual consent. There were pages of details about finances, property rights, what would happen in case of death or scandal. What there wasn't, anywhere in the dense legal text, was anything about fidelity, about respect, about not abandoning your brand new wife in a hotel suite while you fucked your mistress. Because Adrian didn't need to promise those things. This wasn't a real marriage. Lena drained the whiskey and poured another. Her phone buzzed. For a second, her heart jumped. Pathetic. She was pathetic. But it was just her mother. How are you, sweetheart? Your father and I are so happy for you. Adrian is such a good man. A good man. Right. Lena didn't reply. Instead, she opened her laptop and started searching. Adrian Kane, 34 years old, self-made billionaire, or at least that's what the Forbes profile claimed. In reality, he'd inherited a struggling real estate company from his uncle at 25 and turned it into an empire through a combination of ruthless business practices and questionable loans. Kane Enterprises owned half of Manhattan's new development projects. They financed construction, bought distressed properties, flipped commercial buildings. Legal, mostly. Ethical was a different question. Lena clicked through articles, interviews, society page photos. Adrian at charity galas, at business conferences, at restaurant openings with other wealthy men in suits that cost more than cars. Always controlled, always calculated. The kind of smile that never wavered because it was manufactured. Then she searched Selene Vire. The images that came up made Lena's stomach tight. Selene at Adrian's side, her hand on his arm, wearing gowns that probably required structural engineering. Beautiful in that polished, predatory way that came from money and good genes and knowing exactly what you wanted. There were dozens of photos spanning back 4 years. Adrian and Selene at the Met Gala, at a private party in the Hamptons, getting into his car outside a restaurant that had a 6-month waiting list. They weren't hiding it. Everyone knew. Lena found an interview with Selene in a fashion magazine from 6 months ago. The journalist asked about her relationship with Adrian Kane. Adrian and I have a very special connection, Selene had said. He's brilliant, driven, and he understands what it takes to build something extraordinary. We make a good team. Not we're just friends, not it's complicated. A good team. So why had Adrian married Lena? She read through more articles about Kane Enterprises, looking for context, found it in a piece from the Wall Street Journal about corporate governance and investor relations. Kane Enterprises has faced criticism from board members and investors about CEO Adrian Kane's personal life and its impact on the company's conservative investment partners. Several major contracts have stalled amid concerns about stability and long-term commitment. There it was. Adrian needed to look stable, settled, the kind of man serious investors could trust with their money. Enter Lena Voss. Educated at Columbia, daughter of a respectable architect, desperate enough to agree to anything. The perfect prop. Lena closed the laptop and stared at the fire. The dress was gone now, reduced to ash and metal scraps from the zipper and hook clasps. The room smelled like burned silk and whiskey. She could leave. The contract had clauses about dissolution, penalties for breaking terms early, but what were they going to do, sue her? She had nothing. That was the whole point. But if she left, her father lost everything. The house, the last shred of his dignity, maybe his will to keep living. David Voss had been a shell of himself since the business collapsed, and the wedding had been the first time in months Lena had seen him smile. So leaving wasn't an option, which meant staying, playing Adrian's game, being the perfect wife in public while he fucked Selene in private, and Lena sat alone in expensive hotel suites counting the minutes until she could disappear. 3 years minimum. 1,095 days, unless she changed the rules. The thought came quietly, sliding into place like the tumblers of a lock clicking open. Adrian wanted a wife to parade around at business dinners and investor meetings. He wanted respectability, stability, the appearance of being a family man building a legacy. Fine, Lena would give him that. But she'd also learn everything. His business, his partners, his enemies, his secrets. She'd become indispensable, not as a decoration, but as someone who understood his world as well as he did. And then, well, then she'd see what happened. Lena stood up, the hotel robe slipping off one shoulder. She retied it and walked to the window, pressed her palm against the cold glass. The city sprawled below, full of people fighting for power, for money, for survival. Adrian thought he'd bought a desperate girl. He'd miscalculated. She checked the time, 3 in the morning. Adrian still wasn't back. Lena grabbed her phone and opened the Notes app. Started typing. Things to learn, corporate structure, key investors, current projects, competition, Selene's role in the company, Adrian's daily routine, who he trusts, who he fears. The list grew. By the time dawn started bleeding gray light across the skyline, Lena had filled 3 pages with notes, questions, observations. She'd also made a decision. This marriage might be fake, but the power wasn't. Adrian moved through a world of billion-dollar deals and political connections, a world where the right introduction or the right piece of information could change everything. Lena had access to that world now, by marriage, by contract, by default. She was going to use it. Adrian came back at 9 in the morning. Lena heard the door open, the quiet sound of expensive shoes on marble. She was sitting at the suite's dining table, dressed in the jeans and sweater she'd worn to the rehearsal dinner 2 days ago. Coffee in front of her, laptop open, looking like she'd been up for hours, which she had. Adrian stopped when he saw her. For just a second, something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe, or annoyance that she was awake. "You're up early," he said. "Wedding night got canceled," Lena replied, not looking up from her screen. "Figured I'd get a head start on my day." Silence. Then Adrian moved into the room, dropping his jacket on the back of a chair. He looked perfect, of course. Suit still crisp, hair styled. No evidence that he'd spent the night doing anything other than attending a business meeting. "I had work to attend to," he said. Not an apology. A statement. "I'm sure you did." Adrian poured himself coffee from the carafe on the counter, added cream with precise movements. Everything about him was controlled, measured, like he was constantly performing for an invisible audience. "We should discuss expectations," he said, turning to face her. "You mean the ones in the contract?" Lena closed her laptop. "I read it several times." "Good. Then you understand what this arrangement is. A business deal. You need a wife for appearances. I needed my father's debt erased. We both got what we wanted." "Exactly." Adrian sat down across from her, coffee in hand. "As long as we maintain appropriate appearances in public, our private lives are our own." "Appropriate appearances," Lena repeated. "Like charity events, business dinners?" "Among other things. I'll need you at investor meetings, company functions, social gatherings. My assistant will coordinate schedules." "What about Selene?" The question hung there. Adrian's expression didn't change, but Lena saw the tiny shift in his posture, the way his fingers tightened slightly on the coffee cup. "What about her?" "She's going to be at these events too, right? Your business associate." Lena kept her voice neutral, conversational. "I just want to know what the dynamic is. How to play this." "Selene has been with Kane Enterprises for 4 years. She's the vice president of development. You'll work with her frequently." "Work with her. Right." Lena nodded slowly. "And when she looks at me like I'm something stuck to her shoe, I should just smile and pretend not to notice?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "Selene is professional. I expect you to be the same." "Of course, professional." Lena picked up her coffee, let the silence stretch. Then, "Where's my office?" "Your what?" "My office. If I'm going to be Mrs. Kane at all these business functions, I should probably understand what Kane Enterprises actually does. I'll need space to work, access to company information, maybe an assistant to help me get up to speed." Adrian stared at her. "You don't need an office." "Why not? You said this was a business arrangement. I'm taking it seriously. Lena leaned forward. Look, I can either show up at these events and stand there looking pretty but clueless, or I can actually be useful. Your choice. Useful how? I have a degree in economics from Columbia. I spent 2 years working in financial analysis before my father's business collapsed. I know how to read reports, analyze data, understand market trends. All true, technically. Though Lena hadn't thought about that job in months. You need me to play the role of your wife. I'll do it better if I understand what I'm talking about. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, studying her. Lena held his gaze, kept her expression calm and reasonable. Fine, he said finally. I'll have my assistant set something up. Small office, limited access. You report to Marcus Reeves, my CFO. He'll determine what information you can review. Thank you. Don't make me regret this, Lena. I won't. She stood up, closed her laptop. When's the first event? Tomorrow night, investor dinner at Circe, 7 o'clock. Wear something elegant but not flashy. You're there to be charming, not to draw attention away from the business discussion. Understood. Anything else? Adrian looked at her like he was trying to figure out a puzzle that had suddenly become more complicated. No, that's all. Lena nodded and walked toward the bedroom to pack her things. She could feel Adrian's eyes on her back, could practically hear him trying to decide if he'd just made a mistake. Good. Let him wonder. The office they gave her was tiny, barely more than a closet with a desk and a window that overlooked the air shaft. Marcus Reeves, Adrian's CFO, showed her around with the enthusiasm of someone being forced to babysit the boss's annoying relative. You'll have access to general company information, Marcus said, gesturing vaguely at the computer. Financial reports, project summaries, that kind of thing. Nothing confidential. Susan from HR will get you set up with login credentials. Great. Thank you. Marcus looked at her like she was a particularly uninteresting insect. Look, I don't know what you're trying to prove here, but Mr. Kane has actual professionals handling the business. You're his wife. You don't need to pretend to understand corporate finance. Lena smiled sweetly. I'm not pretending, but I appreciate your concern. He left without another word. Alone in her shoebox office, Lena logged into the computer and started exploring. The access was limited, like Marcus had said, but there was still plenty to learn. Project lists, investment portfolios, quarterly reports going back 5 years. She started taking notes. Which projects were profitable, which were struggling, who the major investors were, what their priorities seemed to be. The organizational structure of Kane Enterprises, who reported to whom, which divisions had the most influence. Hours passed. Lena barely noticed, lost in the rhythm of research and analysis. This was something she understood, something she'd been good at before everything fell apart. By the time her computer reminded her it was 6 o'clock, she had 20 pages of notes and the beginning of a map in her mind. Kane Enterprises wasn't just a real estate company. It was a complex web of investments, partnerships, and financial instruments that funneled money through various subsidiaries and holding companies. Some of it looked perfectly legitimate. Some of it looked creative. There were patterns, too. Certain investors who appeared on multiple projects. Specific law firms that handled all the paperwork. A consulting company that seemed to exist solely to bill Kane Enterprises for vague advisory services. Lena bookmarked files, copied data into her private notes, started building a picture of how everything connected. She was so focused she didn't notice Selene until the woman spoke. So, the trophy wife wants to play businesswoman. Lena looked up. Selene stood in the doorway, arms crossed, wearing a black suit that probably cost more than Lena's entire wardrobe. She looked perfect and dangerous, like a knife wrapped in silk. Selene, nice to see you again. Is it? Selene walked into the office, which immediately felt even smaller, and looked around with barely disguised contempt. This is cute. Adrian's letting you have a desk. How progressive. He thought I might be useful. Useful? Selene laughed, sharp and cold. Honey, you're decoration. That's the whole point. Don't confuse wearing the ring with actually mattering. Lena closed her laptop carefully, deliberately, looked up at Selene with the same pleasant expression she'd given Marcus earlier. Is there something you need, or did you just come by to make sure I know my place? Oh, you know your place. Adrian made sure of that. Selene leaned against the desk, too close, invading space. But here's what you might not understand yet. This little arrangement you have, it's temporary. Adrian and I have been together for 4 years. We built Kane Enterprises together. You're just a piece of paper he needed to sign to keep the investors happy. A piece of paper that says Mrs. Kane on it now. For 3 years. Then the contract ends, you get your payout, and everything goes back to normal. Selene's smile was all teeth. So don't get comfortable. Don't start thinking you can actually be part of this. You're a placeholder, nothing more. Lena stood up slowly, forcing Selene to step back. They were the same height, but Lena had spent the last 24 hours running on anger and coffee, and she was done being polite. You're right, she said quietly. I'm not part of this yet. I'm new. I don't know all the players or understand all the games. But I learn fast, Selene. And unlike you, I'm not distracted by whatever mess you and Adrian have going on. So maybe don't underestimate the placeholder. Selene's eyes went cold. Be careful, little girl. You have no idea what you're walking into. Then I guess I'll find out. They stood there for a moment, two women taking each other's measure. Then Selene smiled again, brittle and false. See you tomorrow night at dinner. Try not to embarrass yourself. She left, heels clicking sharply on the tile floor. Lena sat back down and opened her laptop. Her hands were shaking slightly. Adrenaline, anger, maybe fear. But also something else. Something sharper. She added a new section to her notes. Selene Vire. Position, VP Development. Relationship to Adrian, complicated. Threat level, high. Weaknesses, overconfidence. Then she went back to work. Check it. The apartment Adrian had arranged for them was in Tribeca, one of those converted warehouses with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows that real estate agents called architectural masterpieces when they meant expensive. Lena's things had been moved there while she was at the office. Her clothes hung in the walk-in closet next to Adrian's suits, her books stacked on the shelves, in the guest room that was apparently hers. Separate bedrooms. Of course, the place was gorgeous and soulless, decorated by someone who'd been paid to make it look sophisticated but not actually lived in. Gray and white and chrome. Furniture that was more sculpture than comfort. Art on the walls that probably cost more than most people made in a year. Lena stood in the middle of the main living space, surrounded by her relocated life, and felt absolutely nothing. Her phone rang. Her mother. Sweetheart, how's married life? Are you settling in? Your father wants to know if you've seen the new house yet. Adrian's gift was so generous, the renovations are going to be beautiful. Mom, slow down. I'm just so happy. We both are. After everything that happened, to see you so well taken care of. Guilt twisted in Lena's stomach. Her parents had no idea this was a business arrangement. They thought she'd somehow fallen in love with Adrian Kane, that he'd swept her off her feet and saved the family. It was easier to let them believe that. I'm fine, Mom. Really? Just busy getting organized. Of course. I'll let you go. But call us soon? Your father wants to take you and Adrian to dinner to celebrate properly. Sure. I'll check our schedules. After she hung up, Lena walked through the apartment, opening doors, exploring spaces that were supposed to be home. Adrian's bedroom was pristine, everything in its place. The kitchen looked unused except for the coffee maker. There was an office, his, with a massive desk and walls of bookshelves. Lena stood in the doorway, not quite willing to cross the threshold. This was Adrian's private space, and even though they were legally married, it felt like trespassing. She heard the front door open. Adrian's voice, talking to someone on the phone. But don't care what the timeline is. I need it done before the board meeting. Yes, fine. Handle it. He appeared in the hallway, phone still pressed to his ear, and stopped when he saw Lena. I'll call you back. He hung up. You found the place. Hard to miss. Your assistant sent very detailed directions. Good. You have everything you need? Separate bedroom, separate lives, just like the contract says. Adrian's jaw tightened. Lena. I'm not complaining. Just confirming we're on the same page. She walked past him toward the kitchen. Are you planning to be here most nights, or should I expect more business meetings with Selene? That's not your concern. Sure it is. If investors are going to ask about my husband, I should probably know where you are. Lena opened the fridge, mostly empty except for expensive bottled water and takeout containers. Unless you want me to lie? Tell them we're madly in love and can't keep our hands off each other? You need to stop. Lena turned to face him. Stop what? Acknowledging reality? I saw Selene today, by the way. She came to my office to remind me that I'm temporary, that you and her are the real thing. Selene shouldn't have done that. But she's not wrong, is she? Adrian moved closer, and for the first time Lena saw something crack in his carefully maintained composure. What do you want from me? An apology? This is the arrangement we agreed to. You knew what it was. I did. I do. Lena kept her voice steady. I'm not asking you to fall in love with me, Adrian. I'm just trying to figure out how to survive 3 years of this without losing my mind. By analyzing company financials and picking fights with Selene? By understanding the world I'm stuck in. She crossed her arms. You wanted a wife who'd be charming at investor dinners. Fine, I can do that. But I'm not going to stand there like a decoration while everyone whispers about how pathetic I am. If I'm playing this role, I'm going to play it well. Adrian studied her, his expression unreadable. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? A girl who'd be grateful and quiet and easy to ignore? Yes. Honestly. At least he was honest. Lena felt a laugh bubble up, harsh and bitter. Sorry to disappoint. You're not disappointing, you're complicating things. Good. Maybe things need to be more complicated. They stood there in the sterile kitchen, two strangers bound by a contract and a lie, and Lena wondered if this was what her life was going to be for the next 3 years. This cold distance, this constant negotiation of boundaries and expectations. Tomorrow night, Adrian said finally. Cersei, 7 o'clock. I'll send a car for you at 6:30. Wear navy or black, nothing low cut. Minimal jewelry. You're meeting investors. I need them focused on business, not you. Yes, sir. His eyes narrowed. Don't do that. Do what? Make me sound like an asshole. I'm just following instructions. Adrian moved closer, close enough that Lena could smell his cologne again. I know what you're doing, pushing back, testing boundaries. But there are lines, Lena. Don't cross them. She held his gaze. Or what? You'll tear up the contract? Send me back to Brooklyn? My father's debt comes back? I could make your life very difficult. It's already difficult. What's a little more? For a moment, something flickered in Adrian's eyes. Anger, maybe, or grudging respect. Then it was gone, replaced by the mask of cold control he wore like armor. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. He left without waiting for a response. Lena stood alone at the kitchen, her heart pounding, hands clenched into fists. She'd pushed him, deliberately, testing how far she could go before he snapped. Not far enough yet. But she was learning. She pulled out her phone and added to her notes. Adrian's weaknesses, needs control, hates being questioned, pressure point, reputation, use carefully. Then she went to her bedroom, her separate, lonely bedroom, and tried to sleep. Tomorrow, she'd meet the investors. Tomorrow, she'd start playing the role. And maybe, if she was smart enough and careful enough, she'd figure out how to turn this cage into something else entirely. The wedding dress was ash now. The girl who'd worn it was burning too, slowly. What rose from those ashes was going to be something Adrian Kane hadn't bargained for. The dress Lena chose was black, fitted without being tight, with sleeves that covered her shoulders and a neckline that revealed nothing. She looked at herself in the full-length mirror and saw exactly what Adrian wanted. Elegant, forgettable, appropriate. Perfect. She added small diamond earrings, borrowed from the jewelry box Adrian's assistant had delivered that morning with a note that said, "For appearances," and slipped on heels that made her legs look longer but weren't so high she'd wobble. The car arrived at 6:30 exactly. Not Adrian driving, but a professional chauffeur in a black sedan that probably cost more than her father's medical bills. Lena slid into the back seat and checked her phone one more time. She'd spent the afternoon memorizing names and faces of the investors who'd be at dinner, studying their portfolios and business interests until her eyes burned. Gregory Hammond, real estate mogul, old money, invested in 3 of Kane's current projects. Wife died 2 years ago, daughter runs a nonprofit. Patricia Chen, venture capitalist. Made her fortune in tech before pivoting to property development. Known for being ruthless in negotiations. David Strauss. Hedge fund manager, newer to real estate, but hungry to expand. Reputation for asking uncomfortable questions. Lena had notes on all of them, tucked away in her mind like ammunition she might need. The restaurant was in Soho, one of those places that didn't bother with signs because if you needed directions, you didn't belong there. Lena followed the hostess through a maze of exposed brick and candlelight, past tables full of people who looked like they'd never worried about money a day in their lives. Adrian was already there, standing near a corner table with 3 other people. He saw Lena approach and something shifted in his expression. Not warmth exactly, but acknowledgement. Like she'd passed some invisible test by showing up on time and appropriately dressed. "Gentlemen, Patricia, this is my wife, Lena." Adrian's hand settled on her lower back, a gesture that would look intimate to anyone watching. It felt like a brand. "Lena, I'd like you to meet some of our key investors." Lena smiled and shook hands, matching names to faces. Gregory Hammond had kind eyes and a firm grip. Patricia Chen looked her up and down in 3 seconds flat, cataloging and dismissing. David Strauss held her hand a beat too long, his smile just slightly off. "Congratulations on the marriage," Patricia said as they all sat down. "Quite sudden, wasn't it?" "When you know, you know." Adrian's voice was smooth, practiced. "I've learned not to waste time." "Smart man," Gregory signaled for wine. "Though I'll admit, I was surprised. You always seemed married to the business." "Even I need balance eventually." They laughed, comfortable and easy, the kind of laughter that came from years of doing deals together. Lena sat quietly, hands folded in her lap, playing the role Adrian had cast her in. Dinner arrived in courses, each plate arranged like art. The conversation flowed around Lena, market trends, zoning regulations, a development project in Queens that was running over budget. She listened carefully, tracking who said what, noting the dynamics. Gregory deferred to Patricia on financial matters. David kept trying to steer conversation toward his own interests. Adrian controlled everything with small redirects and strategic questions, never appearing to dominate, but somehow always at the center. "So Lena," Patricia said during a lull, "what do you do? Besides being Mrs. Kane now, obviously." All eyes turned to her. This was a test. Lena could feel it. "I studied economics at Columbia," she said. "Spent some time in financial analysis before I decided I wanted to understand how companies actually build value rather than just analyzing it from the outside." "And have you?" David asked. "Learned how we build value?" "I'm starting to." Lena took a sip of wine, buying herself a second to think. "Adrian's been generous enough to give me access to some of Kane Enterprises' project files. The Williamsburg development is particularly interesting. The way you structured the financing to minimize risk while maximizing investor returns." Patricia's eyebrows rose slightly. "You've been studying our projects?" "Just trying to understand my husband's work. Is that unusual?" "Most trophy wives don't bother." The word landed like a slap. Lena felt Adrian tense beside her, but she kept her expression pleasant. "I suppose I'm not most wives." "Clearly." Patricia studied her with new interest. "What did you think of the Williamsburg structure?" Lena had prepared for this. She'd spent 2 hours that afternoon breaking down the financing arrangement, understanding how Kane Enterprises had layered investments to create profit at multiple exit points. "It's clever," she said carefully. "Using the mezzanine debt to bridge between the senior loans and equity means you can start generating returns faster. Though I noticed the interest rate on that mezzanine layer is pretty aggressive." "It has to be," David jumped in. "Otherwise the risk isn't worth it." "True. But if the project timeline slips even a little, those interest payments start eating into the profit margin pretty fast." Lena looked at Adrian. "How much cushion is built into the schedule?" For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Adrian's hand found hers under the table, squeezed once, warning or approval, she couldn't tell. "We have contingencies," he said. "Marcus handles those details." "Of course." Lena smiled and took another sip of wine, retreating back into decorative silence. But something had shifted. Patricia was looking at her differently now, like Lena had suddenly become visible. Even Gregory seemed more attentive, asking her opinion on the wine, including her in side conversations. David, though, David kept watching her with that too long stare, like he was trying to figure out whether she was interesting or just pretending to be. Dessert came and went, coffee appeared, and with it the real business began. Adrian laid out plans for a new acquisition, a struggling hotel property in Midtown that Kane Enterprises wanted to convert into luxury condos. The location is perfect, he said, pulling up architectural renderings on his tablet. Walking distance to Central Park near major subway lines. The building itself is solid, just needs updating. How much are we talking? Gregory asked. Initial acquisition is $43 million, another $30 for renovation and conversion. We'd bring in limited partners at $75 million total, target sale prices around $1,500 per square foot. Patricia was already calculating. That's what, $210 million in total sales if you hit those numbers? Roughly. After costs and fees, investors are looking at 30 to 35% returns over 3 years. Assuming everything goes perfectly, David said. What's the risk profile? Adrian walked them through it. Zoning already approved, contractor lined up, pre-sales agreements in place with a brokerage firm. Every question answered, every concern addressed. He was good at this, Lena realized. Commanding without being aggressive, confident without being arrogant. I'm in for $5 million, Gregory said finally. Same terms as Williamsburg. Patricia nodded. $7 million. But I want quarterly updates, not just annual reports. Done. They both looked at David. He swirled his wine, letting the silence stretch. I'll need to review the full documentation, he said. Have my people look at the numbers. Of course, I'll have Marcus send everything over tomorrow. And I'd like to tour the property. See it firsthand before committing. I can arrange that. Adrian glanced at Lena. Actually, Lena should join us. She has a good eye for spatial flow, and we need to think about how these units will appeal to buyers. Lena's stomach jumped. She hadn't expected this. I'd be happy to, she managed. David smiled. Perfect. Let's say Friday morning, 10 o'clock? After dinner ended and they said their goodbyes on the sidewalk, Adrian's hand returned to Lena's back as they walked to the car. But this time his grip was tighter, more possessive. They didn't speak until they were in the back seat, the privacy screen up between them and the driver. What the hell was that? Adrian asked quietly. What was what? The Williamsburg project, the mezzanine debt analysis. Where did that come from? I told you I was studying the company files. I didn't think you'd actually understand them. He turned to face her. And I definitely didn't expect you to start questioning investment structures at a dinner with our key investors. You put me in that position, Lena said. Patricia called me a trophy wife. Was I supposed to just smile and agree? Yes, that's exactly what you were supposed to do. Well, I didn't, and it worked, didn't it? They took you more seriously after that. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. You could have made me look stupid. But I didn't. This time. He rubbed his temples like he had a headache. Lena, these people aren't playing games. One wrong word, one hint that you don't know what you're talking about, and they'll use it against me. Then it's a good thing I do know what I'm talking about. Do you? Really? Adrian leaned closer. Because what you showed tonight was surface knowledge. Impressive for someone who's been studying for a few days, but not deep enough to hold up under real scrutiny. David's going to test you on Friday. He's going to ask questions you might not be able to answer. So help me answer them. What? Lena met his eyes. You wanted me at this property tour. You volunteered me. So help me prepare. Teach me what I need to know so I don't embarrass you. Adrian stared at her like she'd suggested something insane. You're serious. Why wouldn't I be? We're supposed to be a team, at least in public. Teams work together. This isn't a real marriage, Lena. We're not a team. No, but we have the same goal right now, closing this deal, keeping your investors happy, making money. She shifted to face him fully. I can be useful to you if you let me, or I can just be decoration. Your choice. The car pulled up to their building. Adrian sat there, not moving, looking at Lena like he was trying to solve an equation that kept changing. Friday morning, he said finally. 9 o'clock, my office. I'll walk you through the property details and the financial model. Don't make me regret this. I won't. He got out of the car without another word. Lena followed him into the building, into the elevator, into the apartment that still felt like a hotel. They went to their separate bedrooms and closed their separate doors, and Lena sat on her bed with her heart pounding. She'd pushed again. Harder this time. And somehow it had worked. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Impressive performance tonight. You're smarter than you look. Be careful. S. Selene. Of course she'd been keeping tabs. Lena deleted the message and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. She had 3 days to prepare for the property tour. 3 days to make sure she could hold her own with David Strauss and his questions. 3 days to prove she wasn't just playing at this. The next morning, Lena was back in her shoebox office by 7:30. She'd stopped at a coffee shop on the way, gotten a large dark roast that tasted like gasoline but had enough caffeine to keep her functional. Marcus appeared in her doorway at 8:15, looking annoyed. "Mr. Kane wants to see you." "Now? Does it sound like a suggestion?" Lena grabbed her notebook and followed Marcus through the hallways to Adrian's corner office. The space was massive. Windows on 2 walls, a conference table that could seat 12, leather furniture that probably cost more than her college tuition. Adrian was on the phone when she entered, gesturing for her to sit. Lena perched on the edge of one of the guest chairs and waited. "I don't care what the contractor says. I want it done by end of month." Adrian's voice was cold. "If you can't deliver, find someone who can." "Yes, fine. Handle it." He hung up and looked at Lena. "Coffee? I have some." "That gas station coffee? Try this." He poured from a carafe on his desk, handed her a cup. It smelled expensive. Lena took a sip. It was perfect. Of course it was. "About Friday," Adrian said, sitting down across from her. "I've been thinking about what you said." "And?" "And you're right. If you're going to be there, you should be prepared." He pulled up a file on his computer, turned the monitor so she could see. "This is the property. Built in 1987, 15 floors, 112 rooms currently configured as hotel units. We're planning to convert it to 80 luxury condos." Lena studied the images. Dated lobby, rooms that looked tired but structurally sound, a rooftop that had potential. "Why 80 units?" she asked. "Why not keep all 112? "Economics. Luxury buyers want space. We're combining units, adding high-end finishes, reconfiguring layouts." Adrian clicked through more renderings. "Average unit size will be 1,800 square feet compared to 400 now." "What about the hotel's existing contracts, staff, vendors?" "Being terminated, we'll pay out what we're legally required to." "And the current guests?" Adrian looked at her. "What about them?" "Well, if this is a functional hotel, there are people living there right now. What happens to them during the transition?" "They get relocated. That's not our concern." Lena made a note. "David's going to ask about community impact. Hotels in that area often house people long-term, seniors on fixed income, people between permanent housing. If the press picks up on displacement, it could affect condo sales." "That's a PR problem, not a financial one." "Maybe, but David cares about optics. He'll want to know we've thought it through." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "Fine. I'll have someone draft a relocation assistance plan. Nominal, but enough to show we're being responsible." They spent the next 2 hours going through financials. Adrian explained the capital stack, who was investing at what level, what returns they'd been promised, where the risk actually sat. Lena took notes, asked questions, tried to understand not just what was happening, but why. "The mezzanine debt," she said at one point. "Why structure it this way instead of bringing in another equity partner?" "Control. Equity partners want board seats, voting rights. Debt holders just want their interest payments. But if something goes wrong, if the project runs late or costs overrun, that debt becomes a problem fast. That's why we don't let things go wrong." Lena looked at him. "Has a project ever gone wrong?" Adrian's expression hardened. "Once. Years ago, before you met me. A development in Brooklyn that hit every possible problem. Contractor fraud, permit delays, material costs doubled. We barely broke even. What did you learn? That you can't trust anyone to care about your project as much as you do. That's why I control everything now. Every decision, every contractor, every timeline." It explained a lot, Lena thought. The way Adrian micromanaged, the way he kept Selene close but never quite let her have real authority. "Does Selene know about Friday?" Lena asked. "Why would she?" Because she's VP of Development. Property acquisition is literally her job. Adrian stood up, walked to the window. Selene is busy with other projects. Or you don't want her there. He turned. What's your point? I'm just trying to understand the dynamic. If I'm stepping into her territory, I need to know how to navigate it. This isn't her territory, it's mine. The Midtown property is my deal, my investors, my decision. Okay. Lena stood too, gathering her notes. Then I'll see you Friday, 9 o'clock. She was almost to the door when Adrian spoke again. Lena. She stopped. You did well last night. Better than I expected. It wasn't quite a compliment, but it was close. Lena nodded and left before he could say anything else. The rest of the week passed in a blur of preparation. Lena studied architectural plans, compared the property to similar conversions, researched David Strauss until she could recite his investment history from memory. She barely slept, living on coffee and adrenaline and the stubborn refusal to fail. Thursday night, she was still in her office at 10 o'clock when Selene found her again. Burning the midnight oil. Lena looked up. Selene stood in the doorway wearing a cocktail dress, makeup perfect, like she was coming from somewhere glamorous. Just getting ready for tomorrow. The property tour. Selene walked in, uninvited. I heard Adrian's bringing you along. How cute. It's part of the job. Is it? Because I've been VP of Development for 4 years, and Adrian's never once suggested I needed his wife's opinion on property acquisition. Lena saved her work, closed her laptop. Maybe he's trying something new. Or maybe he's trying to keep you busy. Give you something to do so you feel important. Selene perched on the edge of the desk. You know what I think? I think you're playing a game you don't understand. Acting like you're part of this company when really you're just an expensive prop. If that's what you think, why do you keep coming here to warn me off? Selene's smile slipped. Excuse me? You've been to my office twice now, both times to tell me I don't matter, that I'm temporary, that Adrian and you are the real partnership. Lena stood up. If you really believe that, you wouldn't bother. So what are you actually worried about? I'm not worried about anything. Sure you are. You're worried that maybe Adrian sees something in me you didn't expect. That maybe having a wife changes the dynamic between you two. Lena grabbed her bag. I'm not trying to replace you, Selene. I'm just trying to survive. But if you keep coming after me, I will defend myself. With what? Your economics degree and your 3 days of studying company files? With the fact that I'm his wife. Legally, publicly, officially, you're his mistress. That gives me leverage whether you like it or not. Selene's face went cold. You have no idea what you're talking about. Maybe not, but I'm learning fast. Lena walked past her. See you around. She left Selene standing in the office, heart hammering, hands shaking. That had been stupid. Antagonizing Selene was dangerous, especially when Lena still didn't fully understand what the woman was capable of. But it had also felt necessary. Like drawing a line in the sand. At home, Adrian wasn't there. Lena ate leftover takeout standing at the kitchen counter, then went to bed and lay awake staring at the ceiling, running through property details and financial projections and all the ways tomorrow could go wrong. When her alarm went off at 6, she felt like she hadn't slept at all. The property was worse than the photos suggested. The lobby smelled like mildew and old carpet, the elevator creaked ominously, and the hallways were dim even with the lights on. Lena followed Adrian and David through the space, listening as Adrian pointed out structural advantages and talked about the renovation plan. Load-bearing walls are all concrete, Adrian said. Gives us flexibility on interior layouts. We can open everything up, create real flow. What about mechanicals? David asked. HVAC, plumbing? Completely redone. New systems throughout. They toured 3 different floors, looking at units in various states of disrepair. David asked questions constantly, testing Adrian's knowledge of construction costs and timelines. Lena stayed quiet, taking photos, making notes. On the rooftop, David turned to her. So what do you think, Lena? Is this a good investment? Lena looked around. The roof was a disaster. Cracked concrete, ancient air conditioning units, a water tower that probably dated to the building's construction. But the views were extraordinary. Central Park visible to the north, the Empire State Building to the south. The location is incredible, she said, and the bones of the building are solid, but the renovation timeline seems aggressive for the scope of work. How so? 18 months from acquisition to first sales? That means you're gutting 15 floors, installing all new systems, and doing high-end finishes in less than a year and a half. Lena pulled up her notes. I looked at 3 comparable conversions in Manhattan. Average timeline was 24 to 30 months. David looked at Adrian. She has a point. We've built in contingencies, Adrian said, and we're using a contractor who's done this before. Still, if you run over schedule, you're paying carrying costs on a $43 million acquisition. David walked to the edge of the roof, looked out at the city. What if you hit delays? We won't. But if you do? Adrian's jaw tightened. Lena could see him calculating, trying to decide how much truth to share. If we run 6 months over, she said, it costs roughly $800,000 in additional interest and holding costs, but the profit margin is wide enough to absorb that. The bigger risk is if construction issues force a redesign that could push timelines out 18 to 24 months. David turned back to them. So you've modeled for worst-case scenarios? We have, Adrian said. Lena's been helping with the risk analysis. It was a lie. Adrian had never shown her worst-case models, but Lena played along. The key is having flexibility in the financing structure, she said. If you need to extend timelines, you need lenders who won't force a refinance at higher rates. And do you? David asked Adrian. We do. I can show you the loan documents. They went back downstairs, spent another hour in what would eventually be a sales office, going through more details. David kept asking questions, kept pushing, and Adrian kept answering. Lena watched the dance, saw how David was testing not just the deal, but Adrian himself. Finally, David leaned back in his chair. All right, I'm in for $10 million. Same terms as Patricia and Gregory, plus the quarterly reports. Adrian didn't smile, but Lena saw relief flash across his face. Excellent. I'll have Marcus draw up the agreements. Good. And Lena? David looked at her. You should keep doing this. You have good instincts. After David left, Adrian and Lena stood alone in the empty lobby. The building felt haunted somehow, full of the ghosts of all the people who'd stayed there over the decades. That was close, Adrian said quietly. But you got the investment. We got the investment. He looked at her. You saved it, actually. When you brought up the timeline concerns, it gave me credibility. Made it look like I'd thought through the risks instead of just being optimistic. I had thought through the risks. That's not a lie. I know. That's what made it work. Adrian pulled out his phone, checked messages. I need to get back to the office. Are you coming? In a bit. I want to look around a little more. Why? Because this is going to be 80 luxury homes eventually. Someone should remember what it was before. Adrian studied her for a long moment. You're strange, you know that? I've been told. He left, and Lena walked through the building alone, up the creaking elevator, down hallways that still had room numbers screwed to the doors. She peeked into a few units, unmade beds, personal belongings, signs of people who'd been living here until recently. In one room on the 8th floor, she found a photograph stuck to the mirror. An elderly woman with a small dog, both smiling at the camera. Someone's home, someone's life. Lena took a picture of the photograph with her phone, then carefully removed it from the mirror and put it in her bag. Maybe she could find out who the woman was, make sure the relocation assistance reached her. Maybe she couldn't fix everything, but she could try to make this one thing slightly less cruel. Her phone buzzed. A text from Adrian. Marcus says you need access to the financial models. I approved it. Don't make me regret it. Lena smiled and headed back to the office. The access to the financial models changed everything. Suddenly, Lena could see the full picture of Kane Enterprises, not just the glossy presentations for investors, but the real numbers underneath. Profit margins thinner than they appeared. Projects that were struggling. A pattern of borrowing from new deals to cover shortfalls in old ones. It wasn't illegal exactly, but it was precarious. Lena spent 3 weeks buried in spreadsheets, tracking cash flows and debt obligations, building her own models to understand where the company was actually making money versus where it was just moving money around. She worked late every night, often until the cleaning crew came through at 11, politely asking if she needed anything before they emptied her trash. Adrian noticed. He'd stop by her office sometimes, late in the evening when the rest of the floor was empty. "You're still here?" Lena would look up from her laptop, eyes burning. "Just finishing something. Marcus says you've been asking a lot of questions." "Is that a problem?" "Depends on the questions." But he never told her to stop. And slowly, grudgingly, he started answering some of those questions himself, explaining why certain projects were structured the way they were, what risks he was managing, which investors needed special handling. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't even partnership yet, but it was something less hostile than those first frozen weeks. The social calendar picked up too. Charity galas, industry conferences, dinner parties at the homes of people who casually mentioned their summer houses in the Hamptons and winter places in Aspen. Lena played her role, wore the right dresses, made the right small talk. She learned which conversations mattered and which were just noise, which people actually had power and which just pretended to. And she watched Selene, always watching, always there, positioned close to Adrian like she had permanent claim to the space beside him. At a fundraiser for some children's hospital, Lena saw them together by the bar, Selene's hand on Adrian's arm, her mouth close to his ear. Adrian laughed at something she said, genuine and unguarded in a way Lena had never seen. It shouldn't have bothered her. This was a business arrangement. Adrian's personal life wasn't her concern, but it did bother her. Not because she wanted Adrian, she didn't, not really, but because it was another reminder of how completely she'd been relegated to the margins of his life. "Mrs. Kane?" Lena turned. Patricia Chen stood beside her, champagne in hand, wearing a dress that probably cost more than a used car. "Patricia, how are you?" "Bored, mostly. These events are all the same." Patricia nodded toward Adrian and Selene. "That must be difficult to watch." "What must be?" "Please. Everyone knows about Adrian and Selene. I'm just curious how you handle it." Lena kept her face neutral. "Adrian and I have an understanding." "An understanding?" Patricia's smile was sharp. "That's diplomatic. Most women would be less tolerant." "Most women aren't in my position." "True. Though I wonder if that's strategic or just resignation." Patricia sipped her champagne. "You're smarter than you look, Lena. I've been watching you at these events. You listen more than you talk. You remember details. You're building a network, whether you realize it or not." "Is there a point to this?" "Just advice. Don't waste it." Patricia gestured vaguely at the room. "This world chews up women who don't know how to use their advantages. You have access now to Adrian's business, his connections, his resources. If you're smart, you'll figure out how to leverage that before your 3 years are up. You know about the contract. Everyone knows. Adrian's not as discreet as he thinks." Patricia handed her empty glass to a passing waiter. "I signed a prenup with my first husband that was essentially the same thing. Business arrangement, term limits, everything spelled out. Difference is, I used those 5 years to build my own portfolio. When the marriage ended, I had my own money, my own deals, my own reputation. I didn't need him anymore." That's inspiring. It's practical. You're young, educated, and now you're connected to one of the most powerful men in real estate. Use it, Lena. Build something for yourself. Because when this ends, and it will end, you want to be the one holding cards, not begging for scraps. Patricia walked away, leaving Lena standing alone with her champagne and a lot of uncomfortable thoughts. That night, lying awake in her bedroom while Adrian was wherever he spent his nights, Lena pulled up her laptop and started a new document. Not notes on Kane Enterprises, but something else. A plan. Her own plan. Patricia was right. The contract gave Lena access to a world she'd never have entered otherwise. 3 years of being connected to Adrian Kane, attending events with billionaires and power brokers, learning how money actually moved in this city. What was she going to do with that? She started making lists, people she'd met who might be useful, connections she could build, skills she needed to develop. By the time dawn broke, Lena had the outline of something, not fully formed yet, but real. A path forward that didn't end with her getting a payout and going back to being nobody. Her phone rang at 7 in the morning. "Adrian." "We have a problem." Lena sat up. "What kind of problem?" "The Midtown property. There's an issue with the permits. Get dressed and meet me at the office in 30 minutes. He hung up before she could ask questions. 28 minutes later, Lena walked into Adrian's office to find him with Marcus, both looking at a computer screen with expressions that said, "This was bad." "What happened?" she asked. "The Department of Buildings put a stop work order on the property," Marcus said. "Something about the original permits from 1987 not being properly filed." "How is that our problem? We're not starting construction yet." "It means we can't close the acquisition until it's resolved, and the seller is threatening to walk if we can't close by end of month." Adrian rubbed his eyes. "If the deal falls apart, we lose the investor commitments. Gregory, Patricia, David, all of it." "Can we fix the permit issue?" "We're trying, but the buildings department moves at glacial speed, and we've got 3 weeks." Lena thought fast. "Who do we know at buildings?" "Nobody useful." "What about politically? Does anyone on the city council owe you favors?" Adrian looked at her. "Why would you think I have political connections?" "Because you donate to campaigns. I saw the records." Lena had spent a night 2 weeks ago going through Kane Enterprises' political contributions, mapping which politicians got money and when. "You gave $50,000 to Councilmember Rodriguez last year. Her district includes that property." Marcus pulled up something on his computer. "She's on the zoning committee. Could potentially apply pressure to buildings." "It's worth trying," Lena said. Adrian was quiet for a moment. "Set up a meeting. Today, if possible." 6 hours later, they were in a coffee shop in Washington Heights, sitting across from Councilmember Maria Rodriguez and her chief of staff. Rodriguez was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, the kind of politician who'd fought her way up from community organizing. "Mr. Kane, thank you for the generous support last year." Rodriguez's tone made it clear the gratitude was purely transactional. "What can I do for you?" Adrian explained the permit situation. Rodriguez listened without interrupting, then turned to her chief of staff. "What do you think, James?" "Sounds like bureaucratic incompetence. Buildings is drowning in backlog." James made a note. "We could make some calls, see if we can expedite the review." "In exchange for what?" Rodriguez asked Adrian directly. "What do you need?" "I'm pushing a bill for affordable housing mandates in new developments. 20% of units in any building over 50 units must be set aside for below-market rate tenants. I need private sector support." Adrian's expression didn't change, but Lena saw his hand tighten on his coffee cup. "That would significantly impact profitability. It would also house people who can't afford $1,500 per square foot." Rodriguez leaned forward. "Look, I understand you're running a business, but this city is pricing out everyone except the ultra-wealthy. Someone has to push back. My investors won't support a 20% mandate." "Then maybe your investors need to care more about the community they're profiting from." The conversation was going nowhere. Lena could see Adrian calculating how to salvage this, but his usual tactics, charm, logic, financial arguments, weren't going to work here. Rodriguez didn't care about his profit margins. "What if we did something different?" Lena said. Everyone looked at her. "What if Kane Enterprises sponsored a housing lottery specifically for residents displaced by development projects? Not in the Midtown building, that's not feasible given the investor commitments, but in other properties. We could set aside 10 units across the portfolio, subsidize the rents, target people who've lost housing to conversion projects." Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "It addresses the same issue, displacement, affordability, but in a way that's manageable financially. And it's good PR, shows that Kane Enterprises cares about the human cost of development." Lena looked at Adrian. "We'd need to set up a selection process, work with community organizations to identify eligible candidates." "That's creative," James said. "I like it." Rodriguez nodded slowly. 10 units is a start. Make it 15 and I'll make those calls to buildings." Adrian was looking at Lena like he'd never seen her before. 15 units across, how long?" 2 years, with option to extend if it's working." "Done," Adrian said. They shook hands. Rodriguez made a call right there in the coffee shop, speaking rapid Spanish to someone at the buildings department. When she hung up, she smiled. "They'll review your permits within 72 hours. Should be enough time to close your deal." Walking back to the car, Adrian was silent. Lena couldn't read his expression. "You're angry," she said. "I'm not angry." "You're something." He stopped walking, turned to face her. "Where did that come from? The housing lottery idea?" "I've been thinking about it for a while. Ever since the Midtown property tour, seeing that photograph in the hotel room. Lena pulled out her phone, showed him the image of the elderly woman and her dog. These aren't just buildings to some people. They're homes. And we're taking that away. That's not our problem. I know, but it could be our solution. Lena put her phone away. Rodriguez wasn't going to help us for money or favors. She needed something that aligned with her values, so I gave her that. Adrian started walking again. 15 units is going to cost us. Subsidized rent, property management, tenant services. Maybe $150,000 a year, less than what you spend on investor dinners. That's not the point. Then what is the point? He didn't answer until they were in the car, privacy screen up. You changed the terms of my business without asking me. I solved your problem by committing Kane Enterprises to a social program I never agreed to. Do you want the Midtown deal or not? Adrian looked out the window at the traffic. You're getting comfortable making decisions that aren't yours to make. Maybe. Or maybe you should have made those decisions yourself before letting a problem get this bad. Lena knew she was pushing it, but she was tired of walking on eggshells. You brought me into this company, Adrian. You gave me access to the financials. You took me to investor meetings. You told David I was helping with risk analysis. You don't get to pretend I'm just decoration anymore. I never said you were decoration. You didn't have to. The car pulled up to their building. Adrian got out without another word, leaving Lena sitting alone in the back seat. The driver caught her eye in the rearview mirror. Home, Mrs. Kane? Lena almost laughed. Home. Right. Yeah, thanks. Upstairs, she poured herself a drink and stood by the windows, looking out at the city. Her phone buzzed, a text from a number she didn't recognize. Heard about your meeting with Rodriguez. Clever solution. Almost makes me think you're worth worrying about. Almost. Selene again. How the hell did she know about Rodriguez already? Lena typed back. If I'm not worth worrying about, why do you keep texting me? The response came fast. Because watching you try to matter is entertaining. But don't confuse Adrian's tolerance with approval. He's using you the same way he uses everyone else. At least I know where I stand. Do you? No response after that. Lena finished her drink and went to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. She kept replaying the day. Rodriguez, the housing lottery, Adrian's anger in the car, the way he'd looked at her like she'd crossed some invisible line. Maybe she had, but that line needed crossing. The next morning, Lena was back in her office before 8. She had emails from Marcus about the housing lottery implementation, questions about budget and timeline and which properties to use. She was drafting responses when Adrian appeared in her doorway. We need to talk. Lena saved her work and followed him to his office. He closed the door behind them, which meant this was serious. The buildings department approved our permits, he said. We're closing the Midtown acquisition next Thursday. That's good news? It is. Adrian sat on the edge of his desk. But we need to establish some boundaries. Here it comes, Lena thought. The lecture about staying in her lane. What kind of boundaries? The housing lottery was a good idea. I won't take that away from you, but in the future, before you commit Kane Enterprises to anything, you run it by me first. Clear? Crystal. I mean it, Lena. I appreciate initiative, but I can't have you making promises I can't keep. Understood. She paused. Can I ask you something? What? Why did you really marry me? Adrian blinked. What? I know the official reason. Investor pressure, needing to look stable. But there are plenty of women in your world who would have played that role. Women with money, connections, their own businesses. Why choose someone like me? He was quiet for a long moment. You want the truth? Always. Because I thought you'd be easy to control. You were desperate, you needed help, you had no leverage. Adrian's expression was unreadable. I thought I could put you in the contract, parade you around when necessary, and otherwise forget you existed. And now? Now you're making housing lotteries and questioning my business decisions and somehow convincing city council members to help us. Now, you're complicated. Is that bad? I don't know yet. Lena should have been angry. She should have felt insulted by the admission that he'd chosen her specifically because she seemed weak. But instead, she felt something else. Vindication, maybe? Or just the grim satisfaction of being underestimated and proving everyone wrong? Well, she said, I guess we're both stuck with complicated now. I guess we are. The acquisition closed on schedule. Gregory, Patricia, and David wired their investments, the paperwork got signed, and Kane Enterprises took ownership of a decaying hotel that would someday be luxury condos. Adrian threw a small celebration dinner at an absurdly expensive restaurant, just the core team and key investors. Lena wore red. Not black or navy like Adrian preferred, but deep crimson that made her impossible to ignore. She saw his reaction when she walked into the restaurant, that momentary flash of surprise before his mask slid back into place. You look nice, he said quietly. Thanks. Dinner was champagne and congratulations. Everyone in high spirits because the deal had almost fallen apart, but didn't. Gregory gave a toast about vision and execution. Patricia made a joke about permit bureaucracy. David looked at Lena and said, Here's to unconventional solutions. She raised her glass and tried not to think about how much this room full of wealthy people celebrating would have changed her father's life 6 months ago. How the money they were casually investing in condos could have saved the Voss architecture firm, could have prevented everything that led to Lena sitting here in a red dress pretending to be someone she wasn't. After dinner, while everyone was having after-dinner drinks, Lena stepped outside for air. The restaurant had a small courtyard, fairy lights strung overhead, the noise of the city muffled by brick walls. She was checking her phone when she heard voices. Adrian and Selene, just around the corner, out of sight but not out of earshot. You barely looked at me all night, Selene was saying. We're celebrating a business deal. I was focused on the investors. You were focused on her, your little project wife. Selene, don't. Don't what? Don't notice that you've been spending more time with Lena than you have with me in the past month. Don't point out that you're letting her make decisions about your company. She helped close this deal. Rodriguez wouldn't have talked to us without Lena's housing lottery idea. So what, she's brilliant now? She's your partner? Selene's voice rose. I've been building this company with you for 4 years, Adrian. 4 years of working 80-hour weeks, of making sacrifices, of being there when things got hard. And you're giving credit to someone who's been here 5 minutes? That's not fair. Isn't it? Or maybe the problem is that I'm seeing exactly what's happening and you don't want to admit it. What's happening, Selene? You're falling for her. Silence. Lena held her breath, pressed against the wall, knowing she should leave but unable to move. That's ridiculous, Adrian said finally. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're spending more time with your fake wife than with the woman you've been sleeping with for 4 years. Lena is helping with business, that's all. Right, business. That's why you couldn't stop watching her tonight. That's why you approved her housing lottery without checking with me first, even though development is my department. You're overreacting, and you're lying to yourself. Selene's voice went cold. You made me a promise, Adrian. You said this marriage was temporary, that it wouldn't change anything between us, but it's changing everything. Nothing's changed. Then prove it. Get rid of her. Fire her from the company. Keep her locked in that apartment playing housewife. Whatever it takes. But stop letting her think she matters. She does matter. To the business. And to you? Another silence. Longer this time. I need to get back inside, Adrian said. Lena heard footsteps, moved quickly back toward the restaurant entrance. She was sitting at the bar when Adrian came back in, his face carefully neutral. Their eyes met across the room, and for just a second, something flickered there. Then Selene appeared behind him, her hand sliding possessively through his arm, and the moment broke. Lena finished her drink and went home alone. She couldn't sleep, kept hearing Selene's voice. You're falling for her. And Adrian's response. That's ridiculous. Was it ridiculous? Lena didn't know what she felt about Adrian anymore. The cold anger from the wedding night had softened into something more complicated. Respect, maybe. Professional regard. Sometimes, when he explained a business concept or walked her through a financial model, she caught glimpses of the person underneath the calculated exterior. Someone driven and brilliant and utterly alone in a way that felt familiar. But that wasn't love. It wasn't even friendship, really. And it didn't matter anyway, because Adrian was with Selene. Had been with Selene for years, would probably still be with Selene after the contract ended, and Lena was written out of the story. Her phone buzzed at 2 in the morning. A text from Adrian. Are you awake? Lena stared at the message for a long moment before responding. Yes. Can we talk? I'm in the living room, from the E. She found him sitting on the couch in the dark, still wearing his suit from dinner, tie loosened. He looked tired in a way she'd never seen. What's wrong? She asked. I heard you, outside the restaurant. You were there when Selene and I were talking. Lena's stomach dropped. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I know, but you heard. Yeah. Adrian rubbed his face. I need to explain something. You don't owe me explanations about your relationship with Selene. Maybe not, but I'm going to give you one anyway. He looked up at her. Selene and I started working together 4 years ago. She was brilliant, ambitious, and we clicked. Professionally at first, then personally. We built Kane Enterprises together, every major deal, every strategy. She knows my business inside and out. Okay. But she's not my wife. You are. And that changes things whether I want it to or not. Adrian stood up, started pacing. The contract was supposed to make this simple. I get stability, you get money, everyone knows their role, except you're not playing your role. You're making yourself indispensable. You're solving problems I can't solve, and suddenly the lines are blurred. So what do you want me to do? Disappear? Stop helping? I don't know. That's the problem. He stopped pacing, looked at her directly. Selene thinks I'm falling for you. She said that. She's wrong. Okay. But she's also not entirely wrong. Adrian's voice was quiet. I don't know what I feel, Lena. I just know that when you walked into dinner tonight wearing that red dress, I couldn't stop looking at you. And when David toasted unconventional solutions, I was proud of you. Actually proud, not fake proud for the investors. Lena's heart was beating too fast. Adrian, I'm not saying I love you. I'm not even saying I want to. But I'm saying that you're not just a contract anymore. You're a person I respect, someone I'm starting to trust, and that scares the hell out of me. They stood there in the dark living room, two people who'd started as strangers and somehow become something else. Lena didn't know what to say. Every response she could think of felt inadequate. I heard something else, she said finally. Selene told you to get rid of me. She did. Are you going to? Adrian moved closer, close enough that Lena could see the exhaustion in his eyes. No, but I can't keep doing this thing where we're business partners and strangers and legally married all at once. We need to figure out what this actually is. And what if we can't? Then we follow the contract, 3 years, then we part ways. But until then, I need you to be honest with me about what you want, what you're planning, where you see this going. Lena thought about Patricia's advice. Build something for yourself. Use this access, these connections, these 3 years. I want to matter, she said. Not as your wife or your employee or your convenient solution to investor problems. I want to build something real, something that's mine. And right now that means understanding your business, learning from the best people in this industry, making connections that will matter after the contract ends. And me? Where do I fit in that plan? I don't know yet. Where do I fit in yours? Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled, genuine and tired and almost vulnerable. I don't know either, but I guess we'll figure it out. He went back to his bedroom, leaving Lena alone in the living room with more questions than answers. She stood there for a long time, watching the city lights through the windows, thinking about wedding dresses burning and contracts that were supposed to be simple and the strange way people could surprise you. Then she went back to bed and somehow, finally, slept. Things shifted after that night, subtle but undeniable. Adrian started including Lena in meetings that weren't strictly necessary, asking her opinion on decisions that didn't require her input. They'd end up working late in his office, going over projections and strategies, and somewhere around midnight he'd order food and they'd eat at his desk like colleagues instead of strangers bound by contract. Selene noticed. Everyone noticed. It came to a head 3 weeks later at a board meeting. Lena wasn't supposed to be there. Spouses didn't attend board meetings. But Adrian had asked her to present the housing lottery program to the board as part of Kane Enterprises' Community Initiatives report. She'd prepared obsessively, building a presentation that showed how 15 subsidized units could generate positive press coverage worth 10 times their cost. How it positioned Kane Enterprises as a company that cared about social impact, not just profit margins. How it might open doors with city officials who'd previously been hostile to their development projects. The boardroom was intimidating. Mahogany table, leather chairs, walls lined with photos of properties Kane Enterprises had built. 8 board members, all men over 50, except for one woman who looked like she'd sharpened her cheekbones on corporate politics. And Selene, sitting at Adrian's right hand where Lena had never seen anyone else sit. Adrian introduced Lena with a brevity that felt deliberate. My wife Lena has been working on our community outreach strategy. I'll let her explain. Lena opened her laptop, pulled up the presentation, and started talking. She kept her voice steady, walking through the program structure, the cost-benefit analysis, the partnerships with community organizations. The board listened with varying degrees of interest, some nodding along, others checking their phones. Halfway through, Selene interrupted. This is a lovely idea in theory, but let's be realistic. We're subsidizing housing for people who can't afford market rates. How does that help our bottom line? It doesn't directly, Lena said, but it does help our regulatory environment. Councilmember Rodriguez has already indicated she'll support our next zoning variance because of this program. That variance is worth approximately $4 million in additional development rights. Approximately $3.8 million to be precise. One of the older board members, a man named Richard, who owned half of Long Island, leaned forward. And you negotiated this with Rodriguez personally? My wife and I met with her together, Adrian said. The housing lottery was Lena's proposal. Interesting. Richard looked at Lena with new attention. How many other council members have you approached? None yet. We wanted to prove the concept first. Smart. What's the expansion plan? Lena hadn't prepared for that question, but she thought fast. If we scale to 30 units across the 5 boroughs, we could potentially build relationships with council members in every major development zone. That's leverage for future projects. Expensive leverage. Cheaper than fighting zoning battles we might lose, Richard smiled. I like her, Adrian. She thinks like us. The rest of the meeting went smoothly. The board approved the housing lottery expansion with minimal debate, then moved on to other business. Lena gathered her things to leave, but Adrian gestured for her to stay. Actually, there's one more item. I'd like to propose adding Lena to our Community Relations Committee. She's been instrumental in developing our outreach strategy and should have a formal role. Selene's expression went ice cold. Adrian, can we discuss this privately? I don't think that's necessary, unless someone has concerns about Lena's qualifications. Silence. Nobody wanted to be the one to question the CEO's wife. All in favor? Adrian asked. 7 hands went up. Selene stayed down. Motion carries. Welcome to the committee, Lena. Outside the boardroom, Selene cornered her in the hallway. Congratulations! You've managed to worm your way into yet another part of this company. Adrian asked me to join. I didn't worm anywhere. You think I don't see what you're doing? Playing helpful, solving problems, making yourself indispensable? Selene stepped closer, voice dropping to something dangerous. He's only paying attention to you because you're new. A shiny distraction. It won't last. Then why are you worried? I'm not worried. I'm annoyed. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Making what harder? Adrian and me. Our relationship. He's distracted, pulling back, and it's because you keep inserting yourself into spaces you don't belong. Lena was tired of this. Tired of Selene's territorial games, tired of being treated like an intruder in her own legally binding marriage. Here's the thing, Selene. I didn't ask for this. Any of this. Adrian bought my father's debt and made me an offer I couldn't refuse. I'm doing my best to survive 3 years of a marriage I didn't want to someone who's in love with you. So maybe instead of attacking me, you should ask yourself why Adrian's pulling back. Because I'm not doing anything except showing up and doing good work. Good work. Selene laughed, bitter and sharp. You've been here 3 months. I've been here 4 years. I know this company, these people, this industry better than you ever will. Then why do you feel threatened? I don't. You do. Otherwise, you wouldn't keep coming after me. Lena picked up her laptop bag. I'm not trying to take Adrian from you, but I'm also not going to apologize for being good at what I do. She walked away before Selene could respond, heart pounding, hands shaking slightly. That had been reckless. Selene had power in this company, Connections Lena didn't have. Making an enemy of her was dangerous. But Lena was done being pushed around. Adrian found her in her office an hour later. That got intense. Which part? All of it. The board presentation was excellent, by the way. Richard called me after to say you reminded him of himself at 30. Is that good? Richard's worth about $3 billion, so yeah, it's good. Adrian sat in the chair across from her desk. I heard you and Selene in the hallway. You heard that? Some of it. Enough. He was quiet for a moment. She's not wrong that I've been pulling back. That's between you two. Is it? When you're the reason? Lena looked up. I'm not the reason. Whatever's happening with you and Selene started before I showed up. I'm just convenient to blame. Maybe. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, messing up the careful styling. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. With her, with you, with any of this. Join the club. It was simpler when you just did what you were told. Sorry to complicate your life. He smiled at that, tired but genuine. No, you're not. No, I'm not. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and Lena felt something shift again. These moments kept happening, small breaks in the wall between them, glimpses of something that felt almost like partnership. Dinner tonight? Adrian asked. Actual dinner, just us, not investors or board members or business discussions. I want to talk about something that's not work. You remember how to do that? Probably not, but we can try. They went to a small Italian place in the West Village. The kind of restaurant that didn't look like much from outside, but had been there 40 years and served pasta that made you forget every chain restaurant you'd ever eaten at. Adrian had reserved a corner table, relatively private despite the crowd. How did you find this place? Lena asked after they'd ordered. My uncle used to bring me here when I was a kid. Before he left me the company, before everything got complicated. We'd come here and he'd tell me stories about building his first property, all the mistakes he made. You never talk about your uncle. Because thinking about him makes me wonder if I'm doing this all wrong. Adrian took a drink of wine. He built Kane Enterprises because he loved architecture, loved seeing buildings go from drawings to reality. I took it over and turned it into a money machine. That's not the same thing. But you're successful. By some definitions. He looked at her. Do you remember what you wanted to be when you were younger, before everything fell apart? Lena thought back to college, to the version of herself who'd believed hard work and talent would be enough. I wanted to work in development economics, help design financial systems that actually served communities instead of extracting from them. I had this idea that I could change things, make capitalism work for people instead of against them. What happened? Reality. Student loans, my father's business collapsing, needing to make rent. I ended up in financial analysis because it paid better than nonprofit work. Then even that wasn't enough when everything went bad. Do you regret it, the path you took? Every day? But regret doesn't pay bills. Their food arrived. Fresh pasta, simple sauce, bread that was still warm. They ate and talked about things that had nothing to do with Kane Enterprises. Adrian told her about growing up in Queens, about his uncle teaching him to read blueprints when he was 10. Lena talked about her mother's family in Poland, about visiting Krakow one summer and falling in love with the architecture there. It felt normal, like they were two people getting to know each other, not two people trapped in a contract neither of them had wanted. Can I ask you something? Lena said over dessert. Sure. That night in the apartment when you said you were starting to trust me, did you mean it? Adrian set down his fork. Yeah, I did. Even though I'm complicated? Because you're complicated. Simple would be easier, but it wouldn't be real. He looked at her carefully. Can I ask you something? Fair's fair. What do you want from this marriage? Not the contract terms or the financial arrangements. What do you actually want? Lena had been asking herself that question for weeks. I want to matter. I want to build something that lasts beyond 3 years and a payout. I want to look back at this time and see that I didn't just survive. I grew. And me? Do I fit into that anywhere? It was the second time he'd asked that question. This time, Lena had a better answer. I don't know yet, but I'd like to find out. Adrian's phone rang. He glanced at it and his expression changed. I need to take this. It's Marcus. He stepped outside. Lena watched through the window as he talked, saw his posture shift from relaxed to tense in seconds. When he came back, his face was grim. "We have a problem. A big one." "What happened?" "Someone leaked our financial statements to a business journalist. The real numbers, not the cleaned-up versions we show investors. They're publishing an article tomorrow about how Kane Enterprises is over-leveraged and using risky financial structures." Lena's stomach dropped. "How bad?" "Could tank our stock price, spook investors, maybe trigger loan covenants that force us to restructure debt." Adrian threw cash on the table. "We need to get back to the office. Now." The Kane Enterprises office at 10 at night was eerily quiet. Just Adrian, Lena, Marcus, and a handful of lawyers who'd been called in for emergency damage control. They gathered in the conference room, everyone looking exhausted and worried. "How did this happen?" Adrian asked. "We don't know," Marcus said. "The journalist has documents that should have been secure. Internal financial models, debt schedules, investor agreements. Who has access to those files? Senior management. Me, you, Selene, a few directors." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "And Lena, since you gave her financial model access." Everyone turned to look at her. Lena felt her face go hot. "I didn't leak anything." "I'm not saying you did. I'm just stating facts about access." "Well, state some other facts, like who else might have motive to sabotage this company." One of the lawyers cleared his throat. "Actually, we should discuss motive. Mrs. Kane, your father's firm competed with Kane Enterprises on several projects before it collapsed, correct?" "What does that have to do with anything?" "Just establishing whether you might have reasons to want Kane Enterprises to suffer losses." Adrian stood up abruptly. "Enough. Lena didn't do this." "How can you be sure?" "Because I know her, and because whoever leaked this had to understand which documents would be most damaging. Lena's been studying our financials, but she doesn't have the industry experience to know what would hurt us most." "Unless someone told her what to leak," the lawyer said. "Like who?" "Like a competitor who wanted inside information. Like someone who had access to your wife and might manipulate her into—" "Get out!" Adrian's voice was cold. "You're fired. Get out of this office." The lawyer looked shocked. "Mr. Kane, I said get out." After the lawyer left, Adrian turned to the rest of them. "Anyone else want to accuse my wife of corporate espionage?" Silence. "Good. Let's focus on actual solutions. Marcus, can we find out who the journalist's source was?" "I can try. But if they're protecting their source, we might not be able to force it." "What about the article itself? Can we stop publication?" "Not unless we can prove defamation. And if the numbers are accurate, which they are, we don't have grounds." Adrian paced the conference room. "Then we need to get ahead of it. Issue our own statement before the article drops. Control the narrative." "Saying what?" Marcus asked. "That Kane Enterprises has aggressive but legal financial structures designed to maximize investor returns. That our debt levels are within industry norms. That we've never missed a payment or failed to deliver a project." "That's defensive. It'll make us look guilty." "Then what do you suggest?" Nobody had an answer. Lena sat quietly, mind racing. Who would leak this? Someone with access to sensitive files. Someone who knew enough about the business to pick the most damaging information. Someone with a reason to want Kane Enterprises hurt. Someone like Selene. The thought hit her like cold water. Selene had been getting increasingly desperate as Adrian pulled away. What if this was her play? Create a crisis that forced Adrian to rely on her expertise, that pushed Lena out of the picture? But accusing Selene without evidence would be insane. Adrian might be defending Lena now, but he'd been with Selene for 4 years. He trusted her. "I have an idea," Lena said. Everyone looked at her. "What if we don't fight the article? What if we embrace it?" "Embrace bad press about our finances." Marcus looked incredulous. "Hear me out. The article is going to say we're over-leveraged and taking risks. Fine. We acknowledge that, but we frame it as aggressive growth strategy. We show how every one of those supposedly risky structures has generated above-market returns. We turn the narrative from Kane Enterprises is reckless to Kane Enterprises takes calculated risks that pay off." "That's still defensive," one of the other lawyers said. "Not if we announce something big at the same time. Something that shows we're not scared, that we're doubling down." Lena looked at Adrian. "What's the biggest project you've been considering but haven't pulled the trigger on?" Adrian was quiet for a moment. There's a development site in Hudson Yards, 40-story mixed-use tower, offices, and residential. I've been negotiating with the landowner for 6 months, but haven't committed because the numbers are tight. How tight? Would require a $200 million equity raise, risky given current market conditions. But if it works, could generate $300 million in profit over 5 years. Lena leaned forward. Then announce it, tomorrow, right after the article drops. Issue a press release saying Kane Enterprises is moving forward with its largest project ever. Show that we're not retreating, we're expanding. That's insane, Marcus said. We don't have the financing lined up. We'd be announcing a project we can't actually fund. So line up the financing. Fast. Lena looked around the table. You have 48 hours. Call every investor, leverage every relationship, make it happen. And if we can't? Then we look like idiots and the company probably collapses. Lena kept her voice steady. But if we don't do something bold, the article kills us anyway. At least this way we control the narrative. Adrian was looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. Then he turned to Marcus. Do it. Call everyone. I want commitment letters for $200 million by Thursday. Adrian, this is... I know what it is. Do it anyway. The room emptied slowly, everyone heading off to start making calls. Lena stayed behind, gathering her notes, trying to process what had just happened. That was either brilliant or completely reckless, Adrian said. Probably both. If this doesn't work, if we can't raise the money, Kane Enterprises is finished. I know. And you suggested it anyway. Lena met his eyes. You asked what I wanted from this marriage. I want to matter. That means taking risks when it counts. Adrian moved closer. You realize everyone in this building is going to blame you if this fails. I can handle it. Can you? Because this isn't analyzing spreadsheets or planning housing lotteries. This is bet the company stakes. I know that too. Lena's voice was steady despite her racing heart. Do you trust me or not? The question hung between them. Outside the windows, the city glittered with thousands of lights, millions of people who had no idea a real estate empire might be collapsing. Yeah, Adrian said finally, I trust you. Then let's make this work. They spent the next 2 days in controlled chaos. Adrian and Marcus called investors, pushing for commitments. Lena worked with the PR team on messaging, crafting press releases that positioned the Hudson Yards project as a bold expansion rather than desperate scrambling. They barely slept, living on coffee and takeout, working until their eyes burned. The article dropped Wednesday morning. The headline was worse than they'd expected. Kane Enterprises' House of Cards, how one CEO's risk addiction could topple a real estate empire. The journalist had done their homework. Every over-leveraged project, every creative financing structure, every thin profit margin was laid out in painful detail. The article stopped just short of calling Adrian a fraud, but the implication was clear. Kane Enterprises' stock dropped 12% in the first hour of trading. Jesus Christ, Marcus muttered, watching the numbers fall on his computer screen. Issue the press release, Adrian said. Now. The press release went out at 10 a.m. Kane Enterprises announces $500 million, Hudson Yards development, largest project in company history. Lena watched social media and news sites obsessively. The initial reaction was skeptical, analysts calling it a desperate move, investors questioning the timing. But by noon, something shifted. A few business journalists started writing positive coverage, noting that announcing a major project while under fire showed confidence. An influential real estate blog called it an aggressive but potentially genius move. By market close, Kane Enterprises stock had recovered 8 of the 12 points it lost. We're not out of the woods yet, Marcus warned. We still need to actually raise the money. How are we doing on commitments? $140 million so far. Gregory put in 20, Patricia 15, David 10. We have interest from some new investors, but nothing firm. That's $60 million short. I know. Thursday morning, with 24 hours left on their self-imposed deadline, they were still $55 million short. Adrian looked like he hadn't slept in days. Lena felt like she might throw up. This was my idea, she said quietly. If we fail, we're not failing, but Adrian's voice lacked conviction. At 2 p.m., Marcus burst into Adrian's office where they'd been running numbers for the 100th time. We got it. Got what? The money. Richard came through with 30 million, said he liked how you handled the crisis, said it reminded him why he invested in the first place. And 3 smaller investors combined for another 25. Adrian stood up slowly. We have the full 200 million? We have 205. And interest from others if we want to expand the project. Lena felt her legs go weak. They'd actually done it. The insane plan had worked. Adrian grabbed his phone. Get the lawyers. I want term sheets signed today. And someone get PR on the line. I want to issue an update showing we exceeded our fundraising target. The office erupted in controlled celebration. People who'd looked terrified 48 hours ago were smiling, congratulating each other, talking about how they'd always believed in the plan. Lena slipped out to her office and closed the door, sat in her chair and tried to process the adrenaline, the relief, the sheer terror of how close they'd come to disaster. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Congratulations on your survival, but don't get too comfortable. This was just the first move. Selene. It had to be. Lena stared at the message, her relief curdling into something colder. First move, which meant there would be more, which meant Selene really was coming after her. Adrian appeared in her doorway. There you are. Everyone's looking for you. Just needed a minute. Understandable. You saved the company, Lena. You know that, right? We saved it. Together. He smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, it looked completely genuine. Yeah, we did. He held out his hand. Lena took it, let him pull her up, and together they walked back into the chaos of victory. But in the back of her mind, Selene's message repeated like a warning. This was just the first move. Lena didn't tell Adrian about Selene's message. Not right away. Instead, she started watching, documenting, building a case the way she'd learned to build financial models, methodically, carefully, leaving no room for doubt. She tracked Selene's access to company files, noting timestamps and document names. She paid attention to who Selene talked to, who she met with for lunch, whose calls she took behind closed doors. And she waited. The second move came 3 weeks later. Lena was in a meeting with Adrian and 2 potential investors for a Brooklyn project when Marcus interrupted, his face pale. We have a situation. The Department of Buildings just flagged the Midtown property. Anonymous complaint about unsafe work conditions. Adrian's jaw tightened. We haven't even started construction yet. I know. But they're sending inspectors tomorrow, and if they find anything, real or invented, they can shut us down before we begin. The investors exchanged glances. One of them, a hedge fund manager named Caroline, spoke up. This is the property that was in the news? The one where you had permit issues? Those were resolved months ago, Adrian said. Still, 2 regulatory problems on the same property? That's concerning. Caroline gathered her things. I think we need to revisit this conversation once your compliance situation is clearer. They left. Adrian waited until the conference room door closed before speaking. This is sabotage. Obviously, Marcus said. Question is who? Lena already knew. She pulled out her phone, showed them Selene's message from 3 weeks ago. Adrian's expression went cold. When did you get this? The day we closed the Hudson Yards financing. And you didn't tell me? I didn't have proof, just suspicion. Lena pulled up her laptop. But I've been tracking her activity since then. Look at this. She showed them the pattern she'd documented. Selene had accessed the Midtown property files 4 times in the past 2 weeks, always after hours. She'd had lunch with a reporter from the same outlet that published the leaked financials article. She'd made calls to 3 different city departments, ostensibly about compliance questions for various projects. This doesn't prove anything, Marcus said, but his voice was uncertain. Doesn't it? She threatened me. Then we have 2 crises that benefit her by making Adrian look incompetent and me look like a liability. Lena looked at Adrian. She's trying to get rid of me. Maybe get rid of you too. Take over the company herself. Selene wouldn't... Adrian stopped. Christ, she would. What do you want to do? Marcus asked. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, staring at the evidence on Lena's screen. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat and cold. Set up a meeting with her, tomorrow morning, my office, and get our IT department to pull her complete access logs for the past 6 months. That night, Adrian came home early for the first time in weeks. Lena found him in the kitchen, drinking whiskey straight from the bottle. That's not going to help. Can't hurt. But he got a glass, poured properly. 4 years. I've known her for 4 years. Worked with her, trusted her, thought we were building something together. You were, until I showed up and complicated things. Don't make excuses for her. Adrian's voice was sharp. If Selene did this, leaked our financials, filed false complaints, tried to sabotage our projects, that's not your fault. That's her choosing to burn everything down because she didn't get what she wanted. Which was you. Which was control. Adrian drained his glass. I think I always knew somewhere that she cared more about the company than about me, but I didn't want to see it. Lena moved closer. What are you going to do? Depends on what IT finds. If she's been leaking confidential information, I don't have a choice. I'll have to fire her, maybe press charges. And if the evidence is ambiguous, then I'll have to decide whether to trust my instincts or my history. He looked at her. You're sure about this? Because once I confront Selene, there's no going back. I'm sure. The meeting the next morning was brutal. Adrian had IT print out Selene's complete access logs, every file opened, every document downloaded, every email sent from her company account. The pattern was damning. She'd accessed confidential financial files the day before the article published. She'd downloaded investor agreements that should have been locked. She'd sent encrypted emails to external addresses that couldn't be traced. Selene walked into Adrian's office at 9 a.m. looking polished and professional, then froze when she saw Lena sitting in the corner. What's she doing here? Sit down, Adrian said. Adrian, if this is about... Sit. Down. Selene sat. Adrian slid the printed logs across the desk. Want to explain these? She looked at the papers, and Lena saw the exact moment she understood she was caught. Her face went carefully blank, the same mask Adrian wore when he was hiding emotion. I don't know what you think those prove. They prove you accessed confidential files without authorization. They prove you downloaded investor agreements the day before they appeared in a news article. They prove you've been systematically leaking information to damage this company. Adrian's voice was ice. Did you really think we wouldn't figure it out? I didn't leak anything. Selene, don't insult my intelligence. Fine. You want the truth? Selene's mask cracked, anger bleeding through. Yes, I leaked the financials. Yes, I filed the complaint about the Midtown property. Yes, I've been trying to make you see what a mistake you made. What mistake? Her. Selene pointed at Lena. Bringing her into this company, giving her power, letting her make decisions that should be mine. I built Kane Enterprises with you, Adrian. Every major deal, every strategy, every success, we did that together. Then you marry some desperate girl to make your investors happy, and suddenly I'm irrelevant. You made yourself irrelevant, Adrian said quietly. The moment you decided sabotaging the company was acceptable because you were jealous. I'm not jealous. I'm protecting what we built. By trying to destroy it? By trying to destroy her. Selene's voice rose. She doesn't belong here. She's playing at being a businesswoman, but she doesn't understand this world. She's going to drag you down, Adrian. I was trying to show you that before it's too late. Lena had been quiet until now, but she couldn't stay silent anymore. You leaked confidential financial information that almost tanked the company's stock price. You filed false regulatory complaints that cost us investor deals. You've been sabotaging projects that dozens of people worked on, that hundreds of people depend on for their jobs. Lena stood up. You don't get to call that protection. That's just destruction. You don't get to talk to me about this company. You've been here 5 months. And in those 5 months, I've helped close deals, managed crises, built programs that actually help people instead of just extracting money from them. Lena moved closer. You're right that I don't understand this world the way you do, but I'm learning, and apparently I'm a fast enough learner that you felt threatened. I'm not threatened by you. Then why go to all this trouble? Selene looked at Adrian, ignoring Lena entirely. I did this for us, to show you that she's a liability, that she doesn't belong here, that we're better without her. We're not an us anymore, Selene. We haven't been for months. Adrian's voice was tired. I care about you. Part of me probably always will. But this, what you did, that's unforgivable. So what? You're choosing her? Your contract wife over everything we built? I'm choosing not to work with someone who tried to destroy my company. Adrian opened a folder, pulled out papers. This is your termination agreement. Severance, benefits continuation, non-compete clause. Sign it and leave quietly, or I'll press charges for corporate espionage and fraud. The room went silent. Selene stared at the papers like they might bite her. You're firing me. What did you expect? I expected you to see reason, to understand that I was trying to help. Selene's voice cracked. I love you, Adrian. I've loved you for 4 years. Everything I did was because I couldn't stand watching you throw away what we had for some business arrangement. I know, but love doesn't justify sabotage. Adrian slid a pen across the desk. Sign it, Selene. She signed. Her hand shook just slightly, but she signed every page. When she finished, she stood up, looked at Lena with pure hatred. You think you won, but you're still just his contract wife. In 3 years, you'll be gone and he'll be alone. Was destroying me worth that? I didn't destroy you, Lena said quietly. You did that yourself. Selene walked out. The door closed behind her and the silence that followed felt heavy and wrong. Adrian sat down heavily in his chair. That was worse than I thought it would be. I'm sorry. Don't be. You were right about her. He looked at the termination agreement now signed. 4 years. Feels like longer. Do you want to be alone? No. Actually, I don't. Adrian looked up at her. Stay, please. So Lena stayed. They didn't talk about Selene, didn't process what had just happened. Instead, Adrian pulled up the Hudson Yards project files, and they went through construction timelines, talking about concrete and steel and zoning variances like the world hadn't just shifted under their feet. It was easier than dealing with the emotional wreckage. 3 days later, Lena was working late when her office phone rang. Internal line, extension she didn't recognize. This is Lena. Mrs. Kane, this is Jerry from security. We have a situation on the 15th floor. Miss Vire is here trying to access her old office. She's not being cooperative. Lena's stomach dropped. I'll be right there. She found Selene in the hallway outside what used to be her office, arguing with 2 security guards. Selene looked different, hair not quite as perfect, makeup slightly smudged, wearing jeans instead of her usual designer suits. Let me in. I just need to get my things. Ma'am, your access was revoked. You need to leave the building. I built this company. I have a right to Selene. She turned, saw Lena, and her expression went from desperate to furious. Of course they called you, the new queen of Kane Enterprises. You're not supposed to be here. The termination agreement was clear. I know what it said. I just need 10 minutes to get my personal items. Your personal items were packed and sent to your apartment yesterday. There's nothing here for you. Selene laughed, high and brittle. Nothing here for me. That's perfect. 4 years and there's nothing here for me. That's not what I meant. Yes, it is. You're right, actually. I don't belong here anymore. Selene moved closer, lowered her voice so only Lena could hear. But neither do you. You're playing house in a marriage that's not real, working for a company that's not yours, trying to be someone you're not. And when the 3 years are up, you'll leave with your payout and Adrian will realize he threw away someone real for someone temporary. Maybe. Or maybe I'll stay. Why would you stay? You hate this world. I did, but I'm learning to navigate it. Lena kept her voice level. You could have 2, Selene, like Adrian wasn't asking you to disappear. He just needed space to figure out what he wanted. And what he wanted was you. What he wanted was not to be manipulated and sabotaged by someone he trusted. Selene's eyes filled with tears, which she blinked away furiously. I hope you're worth it. I hope you're worth everything I lost. I hope so too. The security guards escorted Selene to the elevator. Lena watched her go, feeling something between pity and relief. It could have been her, she realized. If she'd chosen to compete with Selene openly, to play the same games, to sabotage and scheme, but she'd chosen differently, and that made all the difference. That night, Adrian was waiting for her at the apartment. I heard about Selene. News travels fast. Security called me. Are you okay? I think so. She's not okay, though. I know. Marcus talked to her lawyer today. She's not contesting the termination, but she's in bad shape. Adrian poured 2 glasses of wine, handed one to Lena. I feel like I should fix it somehow, but I don't know how. You can't fix other people's choices. That sounds like something you've had to learn the hard way. My father. After his business collapsed, I kept thinking if I just worked harder, made more money, found the right solution, I could fix everything. Lena took a drink of wine. But the problem wasn't money. It was that he'd made choices that had consequences, and I couldn't undo those. How is your father? You don't talk about your family much. Better, actually. The house renovations are almost done, and he's started consulting again. Small projects, nothing too stressful. Lena smiled slightly. My mother calls every week to tell me how lucky I am to have married you. Lucky, right. She doesn't know about the contract. She thinks we're in love. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Are we? In love? The question caught Lena off guard. She looked at him, really looked, and tried to figure out what she felt. Respect, definitely. Trust, growing stronger every day. Something warmer than friendship, but less certain than love. I don't know, she said honestly. I know I care about what happens to you. I know I want this company to succeed, partly because you built it, but partly because I've built something here too. I know when you defended me in that board meeting, it meant something. But is that love? Is what you feel for me? Adrian set down his wine glass. I think I'm falling for you. I didn't want to. The contract was supposed to keep everything clean and simple. But you're not clean or simple, Lena. You're complicated and stubborn, and you challenge me constantly. And somewhere along the way, that stopped being annoying and started being what I looked forward to every day. Lena's heart was racing. Adrian, I'm not asking you to feel the same way. I'm just being honest. He moved closer. What we have, this partnership, this friendship, whatever it is, that's more real than anything I had with Selene. She loved the idea of me, the power and success. You see who I actually am, including the parts that aren't impressive. The parts that are just human. Yeah. They stood there in the apartment that had never quite felt like home, looking at each other like they were seeing something for the first time. I need to tell you something, Lena said, before this goes any further. Okay. I'm pregnant. Adrian's face went blank with shock. What? I found out yesterday. I was going to wait to tell you, but... Lena took a breath. We need to figure out what this means. For the contract, for the company, for everything. How long have you known? About 36 hours. I took 3 tests to be sure. Adrian sat down slowly on the couch. We've been careful. Not careful enough, apparently. That night, after the Italian restaurant, we both had a lot of wine, and I remember. He looked up at her. What do you want to do? I want to keep it, but I need to know what you want. Adrian was quiet for a long time, processing. Then he stood up, moved to stand in front of her, and took both her hands. I want this. The baby, you, all of it. His voice was steady. Not because of the contract or the company or what investors think, because somewhere in the last 6 months, you became the most important person in my life. Even though I'm complicated? Especially because you're complicated. He pulled her closer. We'll figure it out. The contract, the business, what this means for us. But we figure it out together. Lena kissed him. It was the first time they'd kissed since their wedding night, and it felt like finally coming home to a place she'd been searching for without knowing it. The next morning, they told Marcus about the pregnancy. His reaction was predictably Marcus. Well, that complicates the contract situation. The contract isn't relevant anymore, Adrian said. Lena and I are staying married. As in actually married, not business arrangement married? As in we're going to try to make this real. Marcus looked between them, then shook his head in disbelief. You know what? Fine. Stranger things have happened. Congratulations, I guess. Very heartfelt, Marcus. Thank you. They announced the pregnancy to the board a week later. The reaction was mixed, some genuine congratulations, some thinly veiled skepticism about the timing. Richard looking delighted because he'd apparently bet Gregory $50,000 that Adrian would fall for Lena within a year. The pregnancy changed everything and nothing. Lena kept working, kept building her role in the company. They restructured her position from community relations to something more substantial, Vice President of Strategic Development, with real authority over project planning and stakeholder relationships. Some people grumbled about nepotism. Lena ignored them and kept proving she deserved the role. 6 months into the pregnancy, the Hudson Yards project broke ground. Adrian and Lena stood together at the groundbreaking ceremony, wearing matching hard hats, surrounded by investors and politicians and construction crews. When Adrian gave his speech about building the future of Manhattan, he pulled Lena close and said something true for once. None of this would be possible without my wife. She's not just my partner in name. She's the person who saved this company, who challenges me to be better, who reminds me that buildings aren't just investments. They're homes, they're communities, they're the backdrop to people's lives. Lena felt tears prick her eyes, hormones and emotion mixing together. She looked out at the crowd and saw Patricia Chen smiling, saw David Strauss nodding approvingly, saw Councilmember Rodriguez in the front row because the Hudson Yards project included 40 affordable units built into the design. She thought about the girl who'd signed that contract 8 months ago, desperate and angry, watching her wedding dress burn. That girl had been trying to survive. This woman, standing here in a hard hat and maternity clothes, holding hands with a man who'd become her partner in every sense, was doing more than surviving. She was building something. The baby came in late November, 3 weeks early and screaming loud enough to be heard down the hospital hallway. A girl, 7 pounds 3 ounces, with Adrian's dark hair and Lena's stubborn chin. They named her Maya, after no one in particular. Just a name they both liked, for a person who would write her own story. Adrian held her in the hospital room, looking terrified and mesmerized. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. We're going to mess this up. Probably, but we'll figure it out. Lena reached out, touched Maya's tiny hand. We're good at figuring things out. They brought Maya home to the apartment, which they'd spent the past month frantically baby-proofing and filling with equipment neither of them knew how to use. The first night was chaos. Maya screaming, both of them exhausted, trying to remember which cry meant hungry versus tired versus just generally unhappy. Around 3 in the morning, with Maya finally asleep in Lena's arms, Adrian made coffee and sat beside them on the couch. Thank you. For what? For not being easy to control, for complicating everything, for saving the company and challenging me and somehow turning a fake marriage into something real. He touched Maya's head gently. For this. You're welcome, but you should know I'm going to keep complicating things. I'm counting on it. The contract sat in a drawer somewhere, forgotten. They'd never formally dissolved it, never drawn up new agreements. At some point it stopped mattering, replaced by something that didn't need legal language to make it real. 9 months after Maya was born, Kane Enterprises completed the Hudson Yards project ahead of schedule and under budget. The building was stunning, 40 stories of glass and steel, with apartments that sold out within weeks and office space that attracted major corporate tenants. The affordable units went to families from the housing lottery program, including one elderly woman with a small dog who'd lived in the Midtown Hotel. Lena made sure of that. The project generated $340 million in profit, exceeding every projection. At the investor celebration, Patricia pulled Lena aside. I told you to build something for yourself. Looks like you did. We did. Adrian and me together. That's even better, Patricia smiled. You know what I like about you? You came into this world as someone's pawn and turned yourself into a player. Not many people can do that. Lena thought about that later, standing in the penthouse suite where she'd spent her wedding night. They'd come back here for the anniversary of Kane Enterprises' founding, some corporate event she only half paid attention to. But she'd wanted to see this room again, to close that circle. The fireplace was cold now, professionally cleaned. No trace of the wedding dress she'd burned, no evidence of the girl who'd sat here alone and angry, watching her life collapse. Adrian found her standing by the windows. You okay? Yeah, just thinking. About? About a year and a half ago. How much has changed? She turned to face him. I hated you then. I know, I was pretty easy to hate. You were, but you're less hateable now. High praise. Lena laughed. I'm serious. You were cold and controlling and treating people like chess pieces. You're still those things sometimes, but you're also capable of changing, of being better. Because you pushed me to be. Because you chose to be. I just gave you reasons. She moved closer. Maya's probably driving your mother crazy right now. She's fine. My mother loves having a granddaughter to spoil. Still, we should get back. In a minute, Adrian wrapped his arms around her, pulled her close. I want to stay here for a second. Remember where we started. In a fake marriage based on debt and desperation? In a situation that should have been impossible but somehow worked. He kissed her forehead. I don't believe in fate or destiny or any of that, but I believe we made something good out of something broken. That counts for something. It counts for everything. They left the penthouse suite together, heading back to their real home, to their daughter and their life and the company they'd built from crisis and determination. The city glittered below them, full of stories still being written, of people fighting and failing and somehow finding ways forward. Lena Voss Kane, no longer a pawn, no longer just surviving, was writing her own story now. And it was better than anything she could have imagined on that night, when the dress burned and the world seemed to end. Sometimes the world ending was just the beginning of something else entirely.